Cool.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Leadership Podcast. This is Ratiba Mohale, and I've got an amazing guest today. I think this conversation was long overdue, and I'm really excited to get into a conversation with this person. I really look up to him, and I also read up on him. I follow him, probably sees me everywhere on his comments. It's like this guy. So hey, welcome, Andrew. How are you?
Thank you, sir. They say if leadership was a person, they would call your name, right?
Yes.
So I guess your thing.
Yeah. So how was your day? And yeah, what did you get up to today? What was interesting about your day?
So I think I'm fascinated at this time of the year. My days are filled with meetings and or proposals that we're doing and back and forth engaging on that. I'm in the training space, so this time of the year, companies are doing their work skills plans, and so you're getting to either engage on a particular proposal or on a particular project or on a particular program that is needed to be run, and so you're doing back and forth. So today was no different. And so I'm
Mm.
kind of computer conversation fatigued, but we'll make sure that this one is not going to be one of those. I never get tired of leadership conversations.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I think to get into that, I was always curious, who is Andrew? Is Andrew Pedi or Venda from South Africa, or is Andrew from Kenya? Because you've been around the continent. So I'm curious to, to those who don't know you, who is Andrew? And yeah.
Andrew is African. However, Andrew hails proudly from Zimbabwe. I'm Shona, and so hence the Tsuro. The Tsuro is Shona.
Mm,
I'm from Harare, Zimbabwe, and yeah, I really find my joy in exploring Africa. The moment I tasted the ideals of travel across Africa, I found that there are a lot of similarities that also require us to get to know a little bit more about it. And that's
mm,
how I got to get my exposure into appreciating the aspects around what makes, you gain pride from being exposed to other spaces because you see the
mm,
diversity that comes with it. I mean, South Africa in itself is diverse on its own, and so
mm.
is Zimbabwe. I always laugh and tell people that you'll be surprised how diverse Zimbabwe is, probably beyond South Africa. It's just that I think South Africa proudly shows that more and so forth. So yeah,
Mm.
Andrew from Harare, if
Oh,
that gives
that's
you the
nice.
clean.
Having coming from Limpopo, I stayed with a lot of guys from Zim, and you pick
Yeah.
up, a lot of, language there. I think I don't know if during the day is what Masora say or Mamoga say, one of those when they greet.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
my mom says morning.
Yeah.
Maswera says the afternoon, evening when your
Yeah.
parents are coming from work. So yeah, it's similar. And again, you find that these are very similar, even with the vendor, Shona and vendor, very
Yeah.
closely related. Tonga, I can pick it out in that setting. And then you
Mm,
also find the Nguni languages with the Nguni elements in it. Interesting to
mm.
note, Zimbabwe has one of the highest, if not the highest, official languages in the continent.
Oh,
And around over 20 as far as I know. Probably 23 or 27, I'm not so sure there. So there's a lot of elements that are fascinating about things, but yeah,
yeah.
it is what it
Wow. Yeah, I
poses.
always thought maybe Nigeria, or like you said, it's because every country PR themselves, and they expose the different things
Yeah,
there, so we never know much. So I always thought Nigeria's got like a lot of languages there as well. You get different people like, oh no, I'm from Igbo State or somewhere, but within the
yeah,
same space. So no, that's very interesting. I think traveling the continent really opens up your mind, and you
true.
you also realize we are more similar than different as well.
Mhm,
Our
mhm.
demeanor and our welcoming, and how we talk
Mhm.
to each other as well. We realize we are more the same than different. I've got an opportunity as well to get to go to Kenya and Tanzania, and you
Yeah,
see the warmth of the people. So
true that.
yeah, I always ask everyone who comes here this question so that they, preface from there. What does leadership mean to you?
I believe leadership to me is your personal example of how you influence people into a particular direction.
Mm,
Um, when people see you, when people interact with you, what are they, influenced or inspired of? What do they feel the need to do after interacting with you? And that's
mm.
what I consider leadership. Because there is also good and bad leaders. So if we are able to identify what you influence people around you to do by your
Mm.
personal example, then I believe that's what leadership is.
No, interesting. I think I like what you said that it's being able to influence people to, either shift to something else or whatever that you are pushing their direction to. So there's a phrase you always mention. So I think I want us to unpack that. There's a phrase you always
Yeah.
mention about redefining leadership in Africa. Yeah, what's
Yeah.
that all about? And why you think we need to redefine the leadership in Africa?
I think to give you context around it, I always ask people if someone was to say, our leader came to visit us this morning, what
Mm,
image do you get when someone says that our leader came to visit us this morning? Now, I will not put you on the spot, but typically responses that I get is either it's a tall man who was wearing a suit and a tie, and sometimes we even go deeper into a specific race and so forth.
mm,
And so that's the image people have of what leadership is. I joked about it earlier when I started the call, and I said, when they call your name, if leadership was a person, they need to be referring to you because that's what Mohale is, if I believe it right. So
yeah.
now, when we talk about redefining leadership, I think it's about breaking the stereotype of what we had groomed our image of leadership is, the portrait that we claim leadership looks like. We need to be able to redefine that.
Mm,
In other spaces, if we start saying particularly leadership in Africa, the first things people think about is our politicians, right?
yes.
If they start talking about the C word, corruption, we start talking about, all the bad things that are associated with what we consider leadership is. But we barely talk
Mm,
about the leadership relating to our families, how we raise our kids. We barely talk about the leadership in relation to how our societies are actually being groomed and put together, the communities that we are part of. We barely talk
mm,
about our social environment or our spiritual spaces. So when we talk about redefining leadership, for me, it's really about us being able to really identify that leadership is not particularly in the government only. And the government is not a reflection of what leadership is in every society or in every space. But let's take it back
mm,
home and find leadership based on what is it that we see in this household. When I was growing up, we used to know that from this family, the
mm,
children from this family do this. And my parents used to say, you don't just wear what you want. When you
yes.
go out there and you on the streets, you are representing our family. So there was an element of leadership in terms of the influence that they carried and how that related. We knew this was a church family. We knew this was an academic family, all those elements. And I think
Mm,
redefining leadership, us being going back to start looking at ourselves as the portraits of leadership. If leadership was a person, it would be you, the individual, and what kind of leadership or what kind of influence are you setting as an example to the people that interact with you on a daily basis? And in somewhat of a conclusion, there's a famous line that I love. A few years back, now it's quite a number of years back, 6 years back, 2018 or so, 2016, 17, 18,
mm,
I believe Cape Town was experiencing a drought of water. Cape
yeah.
Town, South Africa, that is.
Mm,
Yet, isn't it ironic to you? I come from a landlocked country, but isn't it ironic to you that a city covered in two oceans was experiencing a drought of water?
mm. It is.
Two, right? But they're experiencing day zero a drought of water. Yet, Johannesburg, as an example, was not experiencing the same impact, and yet it's
Yeah.
landlocked, right?
Sure.
So
Yes.
what's wrong about that? I also say the same is within our continent. We're experiencing a drought of leadership. But like Cape Town, it's not because they don't have water or like in our continent, we don't have leaders, but the right quality of water the
Mm,
people in Cape Town needed was limited and scarce.
Yeah.
The right quality of water, right? That's what makes it a drought. It's not because there's no water, but the right quality of water. The same thing is in our continent. It's not because we don't have people to take up leadership roles, but the right quality of leaders that we have are limited
Mm,
and scarce. And the limited leaders that we have that are there, instead of raising their hands to serve, whether it's in the community, it's in the in our government settings, where they're raising their hands to criticize. And so I don't believe we're doing any good in that. And so when we talk about
mm,
redefining leadership, it's inspiring and encouraging every individual to raise their hand, despite of color, race, demographic, whether young, old, women, men, whatever demographic you
yeah.
describe yourself. It's about you taking up your own responsibility and being a personal example and knowing that you interact with people and so you influence people into a particular direction. Long answer, but I believe it gives
Yeah.
a synopsis redefining leadership is.
Sure. I think you touched on a lot of things, and you touched on the quality of leaders that are lacking in
Mhm,
the system. You touched on looking inward, in terms of
mhm,
where we come from and the spaces we come from. What is leadership in terms of redefining there?
mhm.
We've got our fathers and our mothers who've been probably married for 20, 30 years. There's been
Yeah.
leadership being practiced there in front of us as well.
Mhm.
Um, and
You're right.
but and then you mentioned that the quality of the leaders, instead of raising hands, they are raising voices to criticize, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I think when you said we are experiencing a drought of leadership in the African continent, I think that touches me a lot. And I wanted to ask, do you think that reason why we experience the drought of leadership in the African continent in general is because maybe the system that has been created to allow maybe some of the quality people to enter and flourish, somehow is not allowing the quality people to come into the center, or is it the quality people themselves who are literally not showing up into that?
That's an interesting perspective, and I wouldn't say there's a particular, it's not a T junction where you have to turn right or left particularly. The way I would love to look at it is, firstly, I think it always, like I said, I always want to look inward first. It's always great to start looking at systems, spaces, and so forth. Systems are always created by people in
Mm,
order to facilitate a particular direction. So systems are critical and important, but it starts with you knowing how to utilize a particular system or how to, use a particular system to create a particular change.
mm,
And we've seen in many cases that we don't need leaders when things are going well. We don't look for leaders when things are going well. We look for leaders when things are going wrong. And so when things are going well, are we saying there are no systems? No, they are there. It's just that we've
mm,
got great leaders at that point in time who are able to navigate the waves and the seas that we are dealing with at that point in time. Whereas when things are going wrong, if you put a wrong leader into that particular space, again, they
mm,
will struggle. And that's how we feel the drawback. And then we start blaming the system instead of looking inward as us as leaders to say, how do I need to rearrange myself? How do I need to reapproach my situation? There's a particular famous book that many people across the world read
mm,
on a regular basis. And it has a particular phrase that I like. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I acted like a child, I thought like a child. But when I
became a
became
man.
an adult, a man or an adult, I left those
The
childish
childish
ways,
ways.
you know. And so the same thing when you're a leader, when you were at a particular position, you need to think, act, and speak like that. But the moment you move and to transition into another space, you need to leave that and fit yourself into it. It's almost like a puzzle piece. You can't, a puzzle piece doesn't fit in any space. There's
Mm,
a particular position. And so the moment you no longer fit into that particular position, you need to now identify yourself in the new bigger picture of things as to where do I fit in. So I don't believe really fully, or rather, I don't believe the reason behind us not having that quality leadership that we need is because of systems or spaces. I think the first pivotal point is we disqualify ourselves because we don't see
Mm,
ourselves as leaders. We see certain people as leaders, and the people that we hold to high regard as leaders, when they don't meet our
expectations, yeah.
doctrined expectation. And I want to call it a doctrined expectation because there's a particular teaching that you've had that leaders are tall, leaders
Yeah.
are men, leaders are dark-skinned, they've got a big chest, all whatever stereotype that you have learned about leadership. And when you confront it yourself, because you don't see yourself as such, it means you've disqualified yourself from entering that stage, whichever system that is. Before the
Mm,
systems reject you already say, nah, I don't qualify to be
to be
on that arena, right?
sure.
And so that's where it starts. So already the screening starts with self. And so those that are crazy enough, in Steve Jobs' words, to think they can change the world are eventually the ones who do because
Yeah.
they think, okay, but imagine, if we're 20 who want to be leaders and then 10 disqualify themselves, then the rest, the 10 that stay behind, we have to
Yeah.
make the best out. And so that's what happens. So, in again, there are systems. I don't
Mm,
disagree. There are spaces. However, I don't believe those are our biggest challenge right now. Our biggest challenge is the mirror or the portraits of leaders that we have created and painted, and we don't see ourselves relating to those.
yeah, sure. I think that answer was loaded, and it makes me think, right? There's different generations, like you've got your millennials, your baby boomers, and whatever. And I was listening to someone, and someone said, no, the South Africa is led by baby boomers, and that the people who were born 1960 backwards, and then you have a generation X who are now the JC, Johannesburg Stock Exchange CEOs,
Yeah.
leaders in the corporate spaces. They never even showed up to lead in the governance of, they literally went to business. And now you have millennials like us, who are in the corporate, kind of dominating, getting into the corporate and all that. So it begs me a question. Are young people ready to lead, or can they even lead? I don't know. I'm just curious. Are we ready to lead, or there's something we have in our mind or in the mindset that is like, okay, I can't do this thing, or
So I will go back and say, as I said before, leadership is not an option. We need not look at it as an option. The question we maybe need to be asking is, how are young people leading in this space? Is it effective the way they are leading? Because they are already leading.
yeah,
So, but if I to answer your question directly, yes, young people are ready to lead, and that's why they are leading. They are influencing certain trends and so forth. And a typical, social example is how
mm,
young people have driven through social media, and look at how organizations, the ones that have been in existence for over 100 years or whatever, are pivoting their structures to suit and fit into the social media aspect or the technological advancements in order
mm,
to be able to keep the audience. And so that's leadership. We are influencing as young
yes.
people how the world revolts.
Mm,
So we need to be to acknowledge that again, we're already leading. The
mm,
question is, how effective are we in our leadership approaches or initiatives? And so when we
mm,
look at it from when we say the baby boomers are leading the country, no, the baby boomers are holding positions
yes.
in the governmental spaces. Now, holding a position and leading
It's a
are two
different.
different, right?
Mm,
And so we need to be asking ourselves, when they are holding, are they leading or are they, bench warming? That's one element. Those that are in corporate, who we say maybe they've decided to shun
the
the
governance,
civil,
yes.
the governance of the countries and everything. We need to be asking ourselves, are they excluded from the governance? Because if they are not, as I believe they are not, because they are running a particular section, there is no government without the economy.
Yes,
They
yes.
are running the commercial aspect around the governance of the economy, and maybe not politically in that setting. But we
Mm,
also now notice that we've got a lot more people who are becoming more educated and more exposed into the political arena and realizing the influence the political arena has. And so as a result of that, there's participation. The same
Mm,
way as young people are also driving their leadership within the entrepreneurial ideas, the innovative approaches they bring in, and they are
mm,
influencing and leading in a different way. The
mm,
unfortunate part is the human brain takes time to adapt to change. And we are
mm,
living in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world where change is inevitable on a very fast pace. And so
mm.
if you're not fast-paced enough, you are almost you're a late bloomer. As we would have known when we we're growing up. And so you're
Yeah.
simply, oh, okay, so people now these days are using this brand of phones. Okay, where
Mm,
do I get it? And you go and buy. There's
yeah.
leadership happening. The question is, are you in the arena participating in the same game or in the same match that is happening, or are you a spectator? And we know that the communities that we live in, we've got spectators and we've got the players, and you choose where
Yeah.
you want to be
Where you
kind
want to
of
be.
the, yeah,
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 no, I love that. I love that, young people are already leading. Um, and even those we seem as if they shun the government spaces, they're actually holding a huge section of the governance in the country. I mean,
correct.
you see them going to Davos and having important conversations, in place of the South African governance as well. So I think they're actually doing um something. I think it goes back to the education or perception that we have when you were saying you have a definition of what leadership is, and when leadership comes in, it's politicians, it's governance. You don't look at business as leadership. You don't look at, social development as leadership. You don't look at all those different. And young people are actually doing a lot in their different spaces. I think
Correct.
maybe it's the hunger of having the same quality of leaders in the forefront of leading civil society that probably says,
Mhm.
oh, maybe these people have shunned, the governance and all that. So I think, I like that. I see you do a
Yeah.
lot of work. I do a lot of work on coaching and leadership development. I want to tap into
Mm.
into some of that. And like, what are some of maybe frameworks that you help maybe leaders to actually, tap into and look into participating in these different spaces and be effective in those roles?
I think, firstly, they are all components of emotional intelligence because I think that's what everything revolves around. I always remind people that we are emotional beings, right?
Yes.
Whether male or female, I know people love to say females are emotional beings and men are logical beings. We can lie ourselves as much as we want. We can
Yeah.
be in denial as much as we want.
Yeah.
People, for example, you are within the subset of what we call people. You're an emotional being. A lot
Yes.
of our decisions, our influences are driven by emotions. And so when we talk about it, there's four subsets to this. There's self-awareness.
Mm,
Self-awareness is being able to define yourself not in comparison to another person, but
mm,
in complementary to the biggest picture that you find yourself in, knowing what your particular space is. I always think of it as look at it as a puzzle. Do you know what kind of a puzzle piece you are, whether you're a corner piece or you're a centerpiece or you are you are the eye or you're the main character of that particular puzzle? Do you
mm,
know that? And that's a lot to do with self-awareness that we deal with and unpack. Once you know yourself, and Aristotle said it, knowing thyself is the beginning of all wisdom.
mm,
And when we talk about leaders that are great leaders, they've been able to apply wisdom and showcase it. And applying it means you then know there's a self-management. You then
mm,
recognize, okay, I'm not going to be frustrated that Ratiba has a beard and I don't. And so maybe there's something less of me that I'm less of a man because I don't have that
mm.
beard or whatnot. Or as I fascinatingly learned recently, I'm less of a man because I
Yeah.
cannot drive a car. That's what I learned. Someone,
Let me
it was
tell
a
you a
debate that,
secret. Let me tell you, my wife
yeah.
drives. I have a license. And I got probably 4 years ago. I've never driven a car. I don't have a car. She drives and I sit on this side. Only now I'm like, okay, I need to go like do practice yana. But I've got the license, you're not alone there.
Right. I get you. And so there was a conversation recently in one of our debate forums where we're just, debating stereotypes, and someone says, well, are you man enough if you can't drive a manual car? And that was the debate around it. And you start thinking, that thought
Yeah.
doesn't just come from nowhere. It comes from a certain particular, angle, and we need to be able to start exposing ourselves into that space. So there's a lot to do with that self-awareness, because I might leave that, or you might leave that conversation because, no, the guy is supposed to be the one driving. And so there's a lot of work doing that, because failure to understand self-awareness means failure to understand other people.
Mm.
Right. So you fail if you can't be self-aware, you can't be socially aware. I always love to ask people questions, say, if you've never experienced love and you don't know what love is, what are the chances that you'll be able to
To give it.
give love or recognize it when it's being given to you?
Yeah.
Because it's foreign,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
self-awareness impacts a lot around social awareness. And unfortunately, because humans are considered to be gregarious, we affect one another.
Mm.
We live around other people. So you, without self-awareness, you also lose out on the social awareness aspect. Without social, so now because you live around people, there's a level of management that you need to carry. You need to know how to restrain yourself and how to offer yourself, and also take manage and accountability and responsibility of yourself. That's self-management. Because if you're unable to manage yourself, how do we expect you to be able to manage other people around you? So there's, again, self-management and social management. So all these quadrants around it really embody what I believe would be a holistic leader, somebody who's able to understand themselves and know that if I hire somebody in my team as an engineer, I might be the CEO of the organization, but the engineer might know best about these rocks more than I do, despite me being the CEO of that organization. But now we find ourselves leaders with no self-awareness. We find them being toxic leaders in the working environment, causing all the social ills that we're dealing with. Currently, trending at the top of the list is mental health. And it's a scenario where we're dealing with a broken society where there's no self-awareness and ultimately no social awareness. So there's disregard for your emotions and how they feel. After all, if I ask you today, when was the last time you checked in with yourself to ask yourself, how am I feeling? And you didn't answer yourself, no, I'm fine, I'm good. What is fine? What is good?
Yeah. How
You
does it
know,
look
many of
like?
us don't even know how we feel. So, but we know, even when we greet each other, good morning, good morning, it's an auto response. It's a chatbot response. And
Mm.
how you feel, oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. And then we pass it out. And yet it's an opportunity for us to unpack how we feel, because if you don't know how you feel, you're likely giving off a different energy to the other person. So if I were to speak of a framework, I speak of emotional intelligence as the
As a whole.
element or the tool that speaks to what we utilize when we speak about leadership coaching, and even in organizations, getting people to develop it and understand that.
Sure. I think that's something very powerful that every
Mm.
organization needs to actually do, because I feel like personally we now have moved into, and I think the Silicon Valley vibe or the bug, it literally
Mhm.
bugged the world, where
Yeah.
you have open spaces and open offices and whatever. And I think sometimes leaders don't realize that people don't function the same. And some people in open, like I struggle personally in open space. I literally have to put my headset, sharpen
Yeah.
my brain to like, cool, you doing this, and you
Yeah.
do that because um you are there's introverts and extroverts and all those different things, and if you are a leader and you're bringing these new people into this space, and that's self-awareness we're talking about, and the emotional intelligence. If you are not aware of yourself and not aware of the people that you're bringing in that space, then it becomes difficult when they don't produce. You don't realize where they are lacking. It's because maybe they work in silence in the secluded space. So can the space afford or provide that for them? And that's something you really mentioned. I always say, when with the leaders, I always say that if you're a CEO, understand that you are anointed right? You are anointed to
Mhm.
lead people sometimes who are smarter than you.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
know where their product they produce supposed to go and how to go on where to take it.
Yeah.
But they are probably experts in what they do. So if you know that you are anointed to facilitate their brain and where the idea is
Yeah.
supposed to go, then you will be at a good place to literally, flourish as a leader. Before
Indeed.
you add, I think maybe I see it's 3 minutes there. I will just
All
switch it
right.
off, then hop in, and then you
Re-
can add from the conversation.
Cool. Let's do that.
Cool.